Hello and welcome to Take Refuge 3D with me, Peter. Welcome back, and if you're new here, then welcome. And in this video, we're going to 3D model this very over-the-top long-range walkie-talkie with a satellite dish using Plasticity. Now, it will be a beginner-friendly tutorial, and I will have my keystrokes on the screen in the bottom right. But feel free to pause and rewind as required, although I will try to call out what I'm doing as I go. Now you can get a free trial of Plasticity from the website if you don't own a copy, and then if you love it, I am an affiliate and you can get a 10% discount off any Plasticity license with my code REFUGE10. So let's just get straight into it. So first of all, if you're brand new to Plasticity, we'll do a quick overview of the UI and settings and whatnot. If not, just head to the timestamp that's on the screen now if you want to get straight into the tutorial. So first of all, you'll notice that the interface is very minimalistic and there's not a lot going on here. We've got these sort of menus on the left and right, and compared to other 3D softwares, which can quite often have lots and lots of things going on, this is very stripped back, but there is a lot of power under the surface. So first of all, I just want to go up to the settings and to the preferences, and under navigation, you'll notice that I'm using the Blender navigation. You can use whichever you like if you're used to a different software. But just so you know, I will be using this navigation in this tutorial. So if you want to truly follow along, you can switch to that as well. And you'll just notice that I've got this zoom to cursor, zoom vertical, and rotate around cursor selected. So you'll see here that the Blender navigation says middle mouse to orbit, shift middle mouse to pan. Okay, so in the viewport, you might have something very similar to this when you open up Plasticity for the first time. We can middle mouse button and we can orbit around. Okay, so that's the first navigation. We can shift and middle mouse button and it will pan. So it's kind of like a camera panning in 2D. And we can also control and middle mouse button to zoom in and out. You can also use the middle mouse scroll wheel to zoom in and out. Now, if we just take our cursor to the left of this cube and we press middle mouse button to orbit, you'll notice a little green dot shows up. Now that dot may not be green for you. I'll show you why in a moment, but you're essentially orbiting around this little dot. So wherever your cursor is, that's where the orbit is going to begin when you press the middle mouse button. Now back in preferences under the P menu here, you can go to appearance and you'll notice that I've got my hot pink as my accent color, as you can see there, and the green is my supporting color. And that is why you will might have a different colored dot. Now you can also mess around with how big you want different aspects of the UI to be and what your background color and your grid color is. I'll let you do you when it comes to that. Now on the left hand side, we've got our outliner, and this is where our objects such as this solid 1 is, and all of the objects that we make. So any curves, sheets, solid objects, also reference objects, and some other things as well, like construction planes, which we'll learn about later, are all kept there. And then we've got this other panel here that says assets, and essentially this is going to be fleshed out in future versions of Plasticity, but at the moment this is just where our materials will be kept. Okay, and I'll show you a little bit about that in a moment as well. Here we've got our toolbar. So this is where some of our very basic shapes and curves are kept, as well as the trim tool and the split tool. Okay, so you can move this to the right hand side if you prefer. I actually don't care. I have it on the left hand side. And if you notice that some of these have a little triangle in the bottom right, that means that if you hold down left click, you can choose between different kinds of curves. So I can change that from a spline curve to a control point curve. And same with our circles. We've got different types of circles, different types of rectangles, and different types of splitting as well. So That's how that works. Okay, you can press escape to ever get out of a command, so that is helpful. Now up here we've got these 4 sort of tabs, and if you're used to Blender, this might be familiar. So it's very, very similar, but not quite exactly the same. So we've got control points, which if we click on that, we don't actually have any control points in our scene at the moment. So it does nothing at the moment. We've got edges, which will allow us to select edges. Faces, which will allow us to select faces. And then we've got this one that says sheet and solid. So this allows us to select any solid objects or any basically non-manifold objects or sheets or planes, essentially. Then as we move to the right hand side, we've got another 4 buttons, and we've got a 5th one here. Okay, so we can change here between orthographic and perspective. You can also press number 5 on your numpad if you have a numpad to do that. And if you're using a numpad, you can also press 1 on your numpad to go into front mode, 3 to go into right hand side mode, and we can press 7 to go into top mode. Okay. Conversely, we can hold down control and press 1 to go into back mode, 3 and control to go into left mode, and bottom is obviously 7. Okay, so we've got that. I'll come out of orthographic mode. We've got this show overlays mode, which will basically turn all of our overlays off. Okay. We can also do that by pressing Alt, Shift, and Z. And that's another way of doing that. Here we can go into X-ray mode, okay, where we can see the back edges of our objects. Okay, so if I press 2, I can now select those nice and easily, and I could go and do something with them like that, right? And then we can go out of X-ray mode by pressing Alt and Z as well. Okay, and here we've got rendered mode. Okay, so you'll notice that that changed slightly and it seems to be a little bit reflective. Now, if we've got an object in rendered mode, we can press M to change the color and properties of the material. So this is very simple, and this will be getting updated in the next version of Plasticity to have a lot more functionality. But for now, we're stuck with this one sort of HDRI, and we can mess around with the different properties. We can take the roughness down or up, and we can take the metalness down to 0. Just give this a bit of an object. And now if we go to assets, we can see that we've got a new material there under our material modes. Coming out of rendered mode, we can see that we're back in our regular sort of what we call shader mode. Okay, so, and if we click this tab here under shader mode, it might already be open. We can choose between different matte caps, which are going to give us different ways of exploring our object and testing highlights and things like this. Now this shader up here is the one that you might spend a lot of time modeling in, or perhaps this one here. I'll spend it in this one because it's sort of the default. There is also a way to bring in your own matte caps into Plasticity, which I've done here, and I could use any one of these. I have done a video on this before, so I'll leave it out of this one. You can look that up if you are interested in bringing in your own matte caps. Here we've got some buttons to show edges. Okay, show curves. We don't have any curves on our screen right now, but that would hide all of them. And we can show faces, which essentially brings up a wireframe for us. Okay, so just know that if you want to look at your object, you can turn the edges off like that. Now, under camera, we can mess with our FOV. I'm actually going to change my FOV to 35, just for a little bit more perspective. And then I'm just going to close that. There is another setting in here called Squish. I really wouldn't start messing with that. That starts to make things a little bit strange. Haven't found a use for that yet, but there probably is one. Okay, under grid, okay, and units, we'll open up both of these, and I'll close down our shaders for a moment so we can just see these. I've got it set to centimeters with a grid size of 200, okay, and a line every 1 centimeter or whatever. So, or don't know exactly how that works, but I've got my snap to grid set to 10 centimeters, and I've got snap to grid turned off. So if you've got snap to grid turned on and you bring a line out, for example, it's going to snap to each increment, which is useful. In some cases, generally, I don't like to have snap to grid turned on, just for, I don't often need it, we'll put it that way. And under snapping, we've got object snapping on, and that's so we can use control to hold down. So if we press G to grab an object, that's a command. You can use the gizmo to move it around. If you press G again, you get screen space movement of that object. And if you hold down control, you can start snapping it to different axes and things like that. So I generally leave object snapping on because obviously this is extremely useful. You can also snap to other objects. Now, if you notice when I press G there, it comes up with all of these different sort of context options down here. So I could press G and then X to conform it to the X-axis, or I could have it on the Y-axis, or I could press Shift and Z, which moves it around only on the Z plane. Okay, so we're constraining it to the X and the Y axis, but not the Z. Okay, and obviously that works for all of the other things as well. And we've got these different options here, like we could press V to choose the pivot. And then when we right click that, that's going to remember that that was the pivot. So it's going to rotate around that face. So these are all very useful tools. Okay, now down the bottom, we've got one more area before we get into the tutorial. And this is basically some commonly used commands. So on the left here, we've got this search commands, which you can click on. And it's got a very long list, which you can scroll down of every single command that's in Plasticity, plus some that you could bring in yourself, like for potentially radial menus, which I've done other videos on. But obviously you could type in anything here. So for example, I could type in fillet, and then I could just choose fillet there. Or like, let's go, I've got the edge selected, and then I can fill it, right? So, or whatever, you know, you could choose duplicate, okay? And the command is there, and I've just duplicated that particular edge, right? So obviously there's a lot of ways to use these commands with shortcuts. Across here, if I've just go here to sheet and solid mode, for example, I've got rectangular array, so I could make an array of all of these. I could also press X to constrain that to the X-axis and bring it out all the way like that. And once I right click to select that command, I can use the gizmo to alter my axis. We've also got radial array, right? Making a radial array. We've got duplicate, Boolean, just some common actions. But Plasticity is very keyboard shortcut orientated. So we'll be going through, and we'll most likely be using keyboard shortcuts or the command menu. Now, with this one, you don't have to click the magnifying glass. You can just press F on your keyboard to bring it up underneath the cursor, which is far more useful. And this far right, 3 dots, brings up a suggested commands option, right? So for example, let's say we go into X-ray mode, we can press this and we can go to hollow, and we can start to hollow out our object. And you'll notice that there's some lines inside of there now. Okay, and that we can go out of X-ray mode. And you may have noticed that we didn't talk about this one here. So this is what you call section analysis. And that can allow you to see inside of a hollow object like so. So that's that. And we won't be using this much in this tutorial, but it's there if you need it. Okay, and then once again, like this menu, you don't have to click down here. You can actually just press Shift and F to bring this up underneath the cursor. So look, that's about the basics, right? And let's get into the tutorial. Okay. So I'm going to delete this object. So with our object deleted, we're going to go into front mode by pressing 1 on our numpad. You can also use this gizmo by clicking on it to navigate back to front, to left, to right, to top, to bottom. But I'm going to use keyboard shortcut numpad 1. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to choose a corner rectangle. Okay. And I'm going to take this to the intersecting point between the blue and the red line, which is the origin of the world. And I'm going to start to drag it down like this. And I'm going to press C. If you look down here, you've got C. And I'm going to toggle it into a center rectangle so that it is mirrored on the X and the Z axis. Now, I actually know what dimensions I want, and instead of wiggling this around until I get them, I can press Tab to choose this here, which I'm going to choose as 18. Press Tab again, and I'm going to make this 30. And I'm going to press Enter or right-click to accept and confirm that. And you might think that 30 centimeters tall is a bit tall for a walkie-talkie. So those dimensions may seem a little bit large, but I find that when working in plasticity, sometimes smaller details have a higher likelihood of an operation failing. So it can be a good practice in some cases to work at a double or more the size that you want and then scale everything down later. I just find we run into less problems. But now that we want, now that we have our shape, if we want to edit our dimensions, there's different ways we can do this. So we can press S on our keyboard to scale this, and we can use our gizmo to scale this on the X or the Z axis. Now this is flat, so the Y axis is going to do nothing. Okay, I'm going to press escape to go out of that because that's one way of doing it. We could also press S and then, like I said before, use one of these context options down here and press like X to just move that around, or we can use the gizmo. Now, I'm going to Control Z and go back to our original one. Now, if we want to edit our dimensions and we know exactly what we want and we're not just eyeballing it, we can press equals, the equals next to the backspace button, and our dimensions come back up. So we can edit these up into a point. So, you know, for example, if you wanted to change this to 35 and this to 12, you could do that, right? I'm going to press escape because I know that I want these dimensions. Now, the next thing is we're going to make the basis of our object now. So we're going to start to work on our primary forms. So we can press this face mode up here or press 3 on our keyboard. And you'll notice as we bring the cursor over this, it becomes highlighted. If we just left click on that, the gizmo for extrude pops up, and we can use the yellow ball on the gizmo to pull this out. Okay. So I'm going to press Tab, and what that's going to do is it's going to mirror it on the Y axis so that we now have basically a mirrored oblong that is mirrored on all 3 axes at the world origin. Okay, I can right click to accept this. Okay, I'm going to go to my outliner, and you can now see we've got solids, which is our solid object here, and curves, which is this rectangle that we made to begin with. Now I'm just going to click on this curves word here, and that's going to highlight all the curves in our scene. And we can either press X to delete this or H to hide it. Now I'm just going to hide it in case we need to use it again later. And then I'm going to click on my solid, which is called extruded.001, and that's because we extruded it. Now, I just pulled that out and I wasn't really looking at the size of that. So I can actually press equals again, and now we get all of our dimensions. So we've got our 30 centimeters tall, our 18 centimeters wide, and it's 6.6 centimeters deep. I'm actually going to bring that into 6. Okay. And I think that is more or less what I wanting in terms of the shape. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to go into edge mode. Okay, and I'm going to select the 4 corners of this object. So you can select one corner, and then you can hold down Shift, okay, to select the next one. And then you can middle mouse and orbit around your object to select the 3rd, and orbit around again and select the 4th. Okay, and now we can use this gizmo. We can go in a negative direction to create a chamfer. And you know you're going in a negative direction because it says minus whatever the number is here. And we can go into a positive direction to create a fillet or a curved edge. And with the fillet, we've got some different objects. We've got the conic, which is the default. We've got G2, which creates a curve with a G2 tangency, or caudal, which isn't going to look like it does a lot here, but it can be useful for getting even fillets in tricky situations. I'm going to stick with the default here. I'm going to press 1 to go into front mode, and I'm going to bring this in. I want it to be fairly tight. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to stick with this, and I think even tighter than that. Okay, and then I can either press OK here, right click, or press enter. I'm going to press enter. And we've got that all the way around like that. And I think that looks okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start to build up our primary shapes of this object, and then we will move into our secondary and tertiary shapes, and then we can add you know, the bits and the bobs. So let's just, working in front mode, figure out what we want here. So I'm going to press 3, 2, and let's just sort of look at this on an angle like that so we can see this, and we can select this. And now we're going to do a command called offset by pressing O. And as we do that, we press O, you'll notice the offset dialog comes up, and we can drag this in and out. Now I just want a little bit of this coming out like that. I'm going to press right click to accept, and now I can use this gizmo to pull this out like this. Okay. And we can also come in and we can use this white area here, and we can give this a little bit of an angle like that. Okay. So you'll notice that if we go into right mode, this has a very slight angle, and I'm going to right click to accept that. Okay. We're going to come back into front mode, and we'll just get some of the basic details on the face of this object, right? Now, if we go and bring out another corner rectangle, we should be able to find the center of this face, and there's a little black dot, and as we come close to it, it will snap, and we can now press C again to bring our rectangle out. And this is going to be like the speaker area. Okay, we're going to G and bring this up, right? And right click to accept that. I think that is nice proportions. And now we're going to press 1 to go into control point mode, and you'll notice that there's these points here. We can use the marquee starting from the left hand side to select all 4 of them, or you can select them one by one and hold down shift. And then we can press B, which is going to bring up our fillet, and we can either go in the negative direction and make a chamfer, or the positive direction and make a fillet. Okay, so I'm going to fillet this, and I'm going to, actually, I'll show you another way to do this. So let's press escape and go out of this. Okay, I'm going to bring this out into being a box, but I'm going to use, this is going to be a Boolean box. Okay, so I'm going to press tab, and that will make it go on the inside, but we won't be able to see that unless we go into X-ray mode. And if we zoom in here, we can see that we are in X-ray mode. So we can see that that's going onto the inside. So I'm going to press Alt and Z to go out of X-ray mode, knowing that it is in inside. I'm going to hit the curves button again here and just hide that new curve. Okay, so once again, we can select all these 4 corners, but instead of having to orbit around each time, if we've got an object where we know that it's going around, we can actually hold down Alt, Control, and Shift, and it's going to select all of the corners going in a ring around the object. Okay, so that's just an easy way to get that done. Now, when we're pulling this out into a fillet, we did choose conic before, so this should work. We should be able to match that to that. So this shape here, this corner here, by clicking on that, we'll do that again. I'm going to press B to bring up the fillet. and we're going to match that to that. Okay, so I think that is kind of looking cool. And then we can maybe press G2 to make that a G2. All right, so it's matching that to some degree. I don't know. I think I want it to be a bit tighter than that though. So I don't actually want it to match in this case. And now if we press 4 and go to object mode, we can press Q, right, for Boolean, or we can search for Boolean in our menu. And then the object that we currently have selected is blue. And if we select this object, that is now red. Okay. And that is going to be a difference Boolean, meaning we're subtracting this new object from the old one. Now, I'm going to right click to accept that, and we've now cut a hole in our object, which is great. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a center circle, and you may be able to get it to lock to this, which is great. Okay. And I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to orbit around, and I'm going to pull this into my object reasonably deep. Okay. And now I should be able to go into front mode, hide my curves, go into solid mode up here, select my object and come down to rectangular array. And I'm going to hold down control. Well, I don't know. I'm not going to hold down control. And I'm going to lock this to this final corner here. Okay. I'm also going to bring this number up, and this is going to go in the positive Z direction, which is not what I want. Okay. I'm just going to bring it down till it approximately is down there, and then I can bring this number up like so. I can bring this number up a little bit. Okay. And now I've got all of those sitting in there. I can right click to accept this. Although I think I want it to be a little bit, the holes to be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to press escape, press 3 on here, and I'm going to make this a lot smaller. And I'm going to go back into solid mode, and I'm going to go to rectangular array, go into front mode. Hang on, rectangular. I need to select the object before. Rectangular array, I'm going to lock it to that. I'm going to make that 2. I'm going to bring that down here. And let's make that spacing about so. Okay, so now we can right click and accept all of those. We can press, we can left click on our main object, press Q for Boolean, and select everything there, okay, with the marquee, and right click to accept. And now we've got all of those holes in there. Okay, so I actually want to give these holes a small, a bit of reflection. So we'll go 2 into edge mode. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to select every single one of these circles while we're in front mode without selecting anything else. But if we pan around and orbit around, we'll notice that we've also selected the back of the holes. And when we chamfer this, we don't necessarily want the back of the holes to be chamfered, because it's just adding unnecessary geometry, which we don't want necessarily. You know, we want to keep it optimized. So I'm going to press 3 to go into right mode, and I'm going to hold down control, and I'm going to take my marquee, and I'm going to deselect those ones at the back. Okay, so now when I press B, I will only have these ones at the front, and we can zoom in and we can just chamfer those. So this is a fillet. Now, if you're working on game assets, it's worth noting that fillets create a lot of geometry. And for something this small, we definitely don't want a fillet. It's something that you can deal with on shader side. So I'm just going to give this a chamfer. Obviously, this could also be just normal detail later on, but in this case, I'm just going to give this a chamfer. If you're just doing this for renders, feel free to give this a fillet or whatever, because the poly count won't be a huge, as much of a consideration when you're rendering it. And if you're just doing it for 3D printing, who cares, right? So I'm going to right click to accept that. And what that's going to do is just give a little bit of a highlight. So if we come back down to our shader mode and turn show edges off, and we can look at our different shader here, we'll notice we can see our highlights here, but we're getting a little bit of a highlight here from this flat edge. So it's just giving us a little bit of reflection there. And you can also add, you know, bevels through a shader later on, or like I said, if that's not a consideration, you can just fill it in. So I'm going to turn the edges back on, okay, and we'll zoom out and we'll have a look at our model. I think it's starting to look okay. We're going to keep working on the front panel details because this is going to be like the most dominant part of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a little screen down here. So once again, we can figure out the size of our screen, and we can just press G and G again to move that around. Now I'm going to give that a little bit of space from our speaker, okay? And I'm just going to select all of those and press B. And I'm going to give this a nice rounded shape. Let's go into edge mode and press G and just pull this out a little bit so we can see what's going on. Now, I'm going to hold down Shift and press I and then select this object, and that's going to imprint this curve onto the object, okay? And then we can just hide that curve that we just we can click on the curve and hide the curve that we made. Okay, and then I'm going to press 3 and we can just pull this in, right? And then we can, using the tools that we've already used, offset that and pull that in, okay? And then what I'd like to do, even though this is not realistic, whenever I'm making screens, I like to do sort of retro future stuff. So I'm going to pull this one out and we're going to use a new command here, which is called raise degree. So if we go down to our selection here and we select this face, we can see we've got one face selected. Okay, so this is like a basic flat object. Now, if I press Shift S, which is to subdivide that face, if I choose that and I press Shift S to subdivide that face, that's done it twice now. You'll notice that this face has gone from being a plane here. I've just gone back a couple of steps. Mistake. So if I now press Shift S, okay, and you can't see what's going on, but if I just press Control Z, you can see that here it says one face and it's a plane, so a flat plane. If I press Shift S, it now says it's a spline, okay? And we'll go into X-ray mode and we'll see what's going on. And now you can see that this face has got 4 points, much like the curve did earlier on. And if we press Shift S again, that's going to subdivide it one more time. So we're raising the degrees of control points. Now, if we just go into vertex mode, right? Now, this might not be your best introduction to raise degree, but what we're going to do is select just these 3 in the middle. Okay, and we're going to press G, and then we can either use the green gizmo or press Y on our keyboard to bring this out a little bit. Okay, and the reason that we'll do that, now, the reason that we do that is to give it a little bit of reflection. But first of all, let's turn these points off because they can get in the way after a while. We've done what we needed to do. So I'm going to press F and I'm going to type in TOG and you'll get the command toggle points. Now I have this set up to Z on my keyboard. So you can right click to add a shortcut or remove a shortcut or add it to your favorites. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to click toggle points and now the control points are not visible. I can press Z again to bring them back now. Now, I'm going to go into edge mode quickly before I show you why I've done this. And I'm actually just going to start to fillet these 3 edges. Okay. Okay. So now if we look at another shader, actually, maybe something a bit reflective, you can see that this screen has got a little bit of a reflection to it. Now, this isn't realistic to how a real walkie-talkie would be, but I just like to add that little bit of CRT, artistic license. Now, what if we wanted to move this around, right? So this is quite an important lesson, right? So this is something that a lot of people don't figure out. If you start filleting things left and right, I might be able to move this around, but you'll see I've selected all of these and now I can't move this around. Okay, so I can move it left and right. Sometimes if I press G and I change to prefer step, that might help, but you'll find a lot of instances where you are not able to move things around anymore. Now, the problem is once you start to fillet things, you really, if we go into face mode, you're really committing to that object sort of being there. Like you're choosing that you might not be able to edit that later on. So you can actually hold down Alt to select a loop like this. And you can hold down Shift to add to your selection. And I'm just going to press X, which is going to dissolve, or you can press Delete those edges. And now, I was just showing that as an example, but for now, I don't want to finalize anything yet. So I'm in face mode. I can select all of those. And now when I press G, it's very easy to move things around. So it's a worthwhile lesson to try not to commit to any fillets early on until you're ready to really, and it can be, sometimes you want to see all those nice highlights early on, but obviously this gives you a lot more control later on because plasticity is a destructive or a direct modeler. Keeping things open for yourself is always going to be handy later on, even if you have to wait and be patient to get the nice results. Okay, so I'm just going to start to bring in another object here, right? This is going to be a button. All right, I'm going to just press S, and I want to get I don't know exactly what the dimensions are, but I'm going to get them roughly right. And I'm going to bring this in, so it's going into the body. I'm going to hide my curves again because I like to keep things tidy as I go. And sorry for waggling around like that. And I'm going to use that trick from before. I highly recommend that you commit this one to memory. So that's Control, Alt, and click. And I've selected my loop. But actually in this one, you can see I've got conic, G2, and caudal, right? I could bring this in, but as I bring this in, this might be the behavior you want. You might want to get this kind of Gothic arch look. In my case, I don't want to do that. So in this case, I'm going to press Escape, and instead of doing that whole loop, I'm only going to select these two. And now you'll notice that there's a fourth option, which is full round, or it's full round fillet. It just says full, okay? If we look at the shapes under here, it doesn't show the full one, okay, under this tooltip. I'm just going to click full and see what that does. And that makes a perfect kind of arch. And then I'm going to do the same at the bottom, okay? And I'm going to make that a full fillet, okay? And now I'm going to select my main body, okay? And I'm going to press Q, and I'm going to take that one out. Okay, and I want a button coming out from there. So actually, all I'm going to do to make the button is I'm going to choose this face here, and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate this face. And you'll notice I now have a face sheet in here. So a face sheet is, if I press period to isolate it, it's just an infinitely thin. It's not a solid object. I'm going to press period to unisolate that. I'm going to select my face sheet. I'm going to come down to these three dots, and I'm going to press thicken. And I'm going to now be able to bring that out. Okay. And now I'm going to scale this. I'm going to isolate actually. I'm going to press S. I'm going to press V. And I'm going to choose this center point at the back to be the place where that scales from. Okay. I'm going to right click. I'm going to press period to unisolate the object. Okay. And I'm going to scale this down to like I can press S again to choose a number. So I'm going to press 0.95. And that's now still touching the back where it started, but it's uniformly scaled from within there. So that's really cool. And once again, I'm not going to fillet it. I'm just going to check my right-hand side mode to see that's not jutting out too far. Remember, because I made my pivot point at the back there, if I just want to scale this in, it's not going to go from the back. It's going to scale. I can scale that out, but the back point is always going to be at the same. And I only want this jutting out a little bit. Okay, so I think that looks cool. Now, I am going to chamfer this, but I'm not dealing with any rounded fillets here. So I've just selected that edge. And as you notice, I don't need to select the whole loop, which I can do by pressing Alt and clicking. I'm just going to select this one, and we can bring that out like that. Okay, and that's just going to give it, if we look at our another shader, we can move around and see that that does have some different highlights to that. Okay, so we want a little bit more details on here. So I guess I want 3 or maybe 5 sort of indentations on the face here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, okay, we'll bring out a cylinder. We'll press 3 to go into write mode. Okay, and I'm just around about here, I'm going to bring out a small circle. Okay, and I'm going to GG. All right, I'm going to press 1 to go into front mode, and I'm going to GG, and I want this to match the center of that screen. Okay, I'm going to bring this down. Okay, I'm going to select either side of this, holding down Shift to select multiple, and I'm going to pull this out so it's parallel. The reason why I brought that to the center of that screen is that when I bring it down, I want symmetry with this. I want that to be the guide, basically. So we're not having like things in random places so it looks off kilter. And let's just bring that out a little bit wider than what the screen is. Now, if we start a fillet on here, and then we select the body of a cylinder, it actually makes this nice rounded shape here. So we can do that to either end. Okay. Making sure it's a fillet, not a chamfer. And now we've kind of got this, what would you call this? Like a pill shape, I guess. Or a capsule, I think they call it. And then I'm going to get my rectangular array. And obviously we want to bring our number of that one down to 1. And down here it says that I can commit to the X or the Y axis. So I'm going to try and commit to the X axis. That's going to bring it left and right. I'm going to try and commit to the Y axis. And it's actually going to bring it up and down in this case. Okay. I'm going to bring this down to about here. And then we're going to change this number to 5. All right. And another way that you can change the number is you can hold down Shift and just scroll your mouse wheel as well. And I'm going to right click. I'm going to press 4 to choose body mode. And I'm going to press Q and I'm going to drag and I'm going to keep all of those in there. Okay. And now we've got this kind of, I don't know, these little indentations here. And once again, if you want to move them around or scale them, you can press double S. And I think I do want to make those a little bit smaller and maybe a little bit wider. I don't want anything really imposing on any other component. I might drag all of these up a little. And I might scale all of this down a little. So what you see here, I might just bring this down, scale it on that and that. So what I've been able to do by not committing to any details as yet, okay, I have been able to edit my object after the fact and get my proportions a bit better. And even now, I think that screen is not exactly where it needs to be. All right, I think that looks quite nice, and that layout's quite nice. Okay, so we are where we are. Okay, I've got a funny... What's going on here? So this has some strange topology. We've got two solids. So what we can do sometimes, select our whole object and we can press FRED to delete any redundant topology, and that's been fixed up. Okay, so if you see weird topology, you can delete the redundant topology. So we'll just go back a step. So what that is I've pressed F to bring up my commands menu, and I've typed in RED because I know that's the first 3 letters of redundant. And now I'm deleting any excess topology that's not necessary anymore. So I don't know how that happened, but it did, and I noticed it. And it's good practice just every once in a while to go and delete the redundant topology. Sometimes there's redundant topology that you may want to keep for various reasons, but in this case the answer is no. Okay, so we've got the main shape of our object. So let's start on some secondary details. Okay, so first of all, let's work on our fillets, right? So at the front. So I want this to have a little bit of a fillet. And in fact, I want to select this edge, and I want those fillets to be reasonably matching. I can make that... It's probably not going to work if I press full. No. But if I press G2, we'll get a G2 fillet. And on the top, actually what I want to do with this, I want to select this face here, this one that goes all the way around, and see if I can mess with that. No, I can't because I made that fillet. So we go back a step. Whoa. Oh, it really doesn't like it. Okay, so I'm not going to play around with that, and we'll just go back to what we were doing. Okay, we're going to make that a G2 fillet. Okay, and then we can, up here, I think, and we'll choose the back edge, hold down shift to add to your selection. We're going to give this some... No, I still want this to be reasonably sharp. And we can make that a G2 fillet as well, and maybe just a little bit bigger. Okay, and then we can do the same here. And we'll make this one a chamfer, right? But then we'll give 2 small fillets here. Okay, what we're doing is we're just building up highlights, right? So you can even go into a different shader to see how your highlights are going to appear. All right, we can turn off our edges, and we can start to see that we're starting to get something really nice looking. Okay, now that I'm happy with all of the placement of these, I can add the fillets. I'm going to turn my edges back on, and I'm just going to stay in this matte cap for a moment to... I don't want that one, so we can hold down Control and just do the marquee and deselect that. And we're going to give this some nice rounding there. Okay, and this outside can have a very tight fillet, and this can be a little bit more rounded. All right, and then I only need to select one edge from each of these, and fingers crossed we'll get a nice rounding there as well. Now when we turn our edges off, you'll notice now that we've got lots of shiny highlights, but we've more or less committed to having these places where they are. We might be able to move them around after the fact, we might not. So that's why I got everything where I wanted it to be before I started to add the fillets. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to turn our edges back on, and we're going to select this fillet at the back, and I'm going to press spacebar, and that is going to make a temporary construction plane. So we're in an orthographic view, and the very center of our construction plane, actually it's probably easier to show you on this. So on this one, I'm going to press spacebar, and you'll notice this now becomes our construction plane with our center in the middle. So now if I want to make an object on this, just using this as an example, I can use that that face there like that, right? But I want to use this face here, and I'm going to make a rectangle coming out. Press C to make it a center. We can zoom in a little bit. We don't really want to lock it to anything, so you can actually hold down Control to get a little bit more control. And let's just bring this out like that. And yep, I think that's about the size I want it. I want to go back to that construction plane. So I'm going to press 1 and I'm going to bevel these edges with a fillet. Okay, so now that we have our guy here, okay, we can take a rectangular array and drag it down this center line on our temporary plane. Okay, something like that. And with them all selected, you can press Shift I and they will imprint onto the object. Okay, now I'm going to hide my curves. Okay, and what we can do is we can get rid of our temporary plane and we can use our marquee, hopefully, to select. No, that's not going to work. We just select each face one by one, okay, for now. All right, so there's not too many faces to select. There's other ways to get to do this, but we're going to do it this way, okay? And now we can just bring those in a little bit like so, okay? And once we've got it pulled in where we want it, we can right click. Now, as we go around our object, we maybe want to choose where we want it to be. So we should be able to select only those from that side. And we should be able to like G. Is there anything else selected? It's not liking moving that around. I think we can leave it there for now, but maybe be a little bit more particular about where you want it, when you want it. And we can select one of each of these edges. I'm going to go. And we can chamfer or fillet those. Up to you. I think in my case, I want to do a fillet. And then I want it to be quite a lot smaller than that. So I'm going to maybe do half of that. So 0.15 maybe. All right. Okay. And right click to accept. And there we've got that detailing there on the back. Okay, so this is, I think the body almost done. I'm going to do one more thing to this body just to give it some extra detail. Is I'm going to go into side mode. Okay, I can press Control and 3 or 3 to go into the side mode. But I want to look at this side, so I'm going to go into the left-hand side mode. And just left of the center line, I'm going to bring down a line, and I want to lock this to the Z, right? And I'm going to right-click to accept that. And I'm going to just press C on my keyboard to cut all the way through the model, okay? And then I'm going to hide my curves, okay, once again. And I should be able to select just 2 edges here, although that's selected a lot more. So I'm going to go into top mode and select just these 2 edges here. By the way, if I go my marquee from left to right, it will only select something that's fully encompassed, right? But if I go left to right, the marquee is going to select anything it touches. So that should have selected the top and bottom. And this has continuity all the way around because I filleted those edges earlier on. I should just be able to pull this out and give detail there. Okay, it does end approximately there, but that's okay. That's fine by me. And I could just hypothetically hold down Shift and where am I? Hypothetically hold down Shift and select those ones to bevel those as well. and get them to match that. Okay, I think that looks kind of cool. All right, there we are. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to select these two and I want them joined together as one object. So I'm going to QQ twice to do a Boolean union. And now we can work on the sticky outy stuff, right? Like the aerial and stuff like that. So I'm going to go into top mode and I'm going to take a center circle. All right. And this is going to be the base of my aerial. All right. I'm going to get it into position by pressing G. I think the aerial might need to be a little bit further in. And I think the base of the aerial can just press S and S to scale it up a little bit. And I am going to go into 3. And I'm going to try and select, yeah, that. And I'm going to pull that up, right? Not that high. And I'm going to use this white circle here to bring that in a little bit. I'm going to press 3 to select that face. And I'm going to press E to extrude. And I'm going to extrude this one up. Okay. And I'm going to bring so I'm going to press Alt-R to bring a line in, okay, which is called isoparam. You can also search for it, isoparam. It's a little bit like a loop cut in Blender, but it doesn't go all the way through. And I'm going to bring that down here, and I'm just going to do one more. And you press Tab to change the direction, by the way. And I'm going to bring that in like that. And with this, I'm going to use this again and very slightly give that a very slight angle because I want this aerial to be getting kind of smaller as it goes up. And actually, I think I want this section to be a little bit taller and not that much of an angle. Okay. Now, remember, we could subdivide a face. We can do that here, Shift and S, okay? And then this is already kind of subdivided. I'm going to go into X-ray mode so I can see the ones at the back. And I'm going to select all of these ones, and I'm just going to press S and S to scale that like that. And then I'm going to press Z to toggle my points, and that is ever so slightly rounded. It's a very subtle detail, but when you're working with stuff that's going to be lit later on, you do want some variation in your highlights. Okay, so just having those little bits of variation can really make your model pop. Just hiding my curves and tidying up. Okay, so you can see that there's like the fall off on that lighting on this shader here is really nice. Okay, so let's keep working. I'm going to offset this by pressing O. Okay, and I'm just going to extrude it up directly. I'm going to give it a little bit more detail than that. Okay, so I'm going to extrude this one up here. And then just looking at front mode, how big do we want our area to be? How chunky do we want it to be? I think that is kind of nice. Alrighty, so what I'll do now is I'll do another isoparam cut on this. I'm going to pull this up like that. I'm going to pull it out. And I'm going to fillet this. And I'm going to try to let's give it that. Okay. I think that might be a little bit too chunky though. So for some reason doesn't want to allow me to do that full cat fillet there, but that's okay. So I think that looks okay, but I think it's a little bit fat. So we can press S and Shift Z, like it says here, to lock that scaling to the plane. And I want to press 1, oh no, 2 to select all the edges, or 3 to select all the faces and drag this across here. I'm just going to pull that up like that a little bit because that's a little bit long. Okay, so that looks really cool. So finally, well, not quite finally, let's put some dials on the side here. Okay, so going into side mode, let's take another center circle, okay, and bring this out like that. And then we could just really, I'm gonna make this scale a little bit smaller. Gonna bring that out like so. Let's bring it out a little bit wider, and then just gonna give that face here. If the ISO param is not going on the face you want it to, just select the face, press tab, and I'm going to pull this out further. I want to take this face out, so we've got this nice round toggle. I think I probably want to press 4 and just drag this down the model a little bit. Go and hide our curve. Okay, and what we can do, go into front mode, take out a corner rectangle and try and lock it to the middle, but we cannot, so we can press Alt-Z to go into X-ray mode. Okay, I'm going to press C to make that a center. And I think if I've done this correctly, it should be at the back. Yeah, so we can press Alt-Z. We've got this little guy here, right? I want to go into edge mode, scale this across. Okay, so it's fairly close to the edge. And what do we want to do? We want to pull this guy out. So we press 3 and pull it out. Now I do want to give it a little bit of its own detail. So I'm going to subdivide this front face. Let's hide our curves. I must have deleted all of the curves at some point, so I can't bring those back. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these 3. And I'm going to select these 3 by holding down Shift. I'm going to press G, drag them back. All right. And I'm going to select this one, and this one. And I'm going to press G, and I'm going to bring them back. Right. Then I'm going to select all the edges there. And yeah, we can do our Alt, Control, Shift click to get all of those edges, and we can bring that around, and we can give this a fillet or a chamfer, right? I'm not going to bother too much about this, but what we might notice if we zoom right in is that this isn't touching, right? So this back edge. So what we can do is we can bring this out, right? And now that we've got this out, we can twiddle the gizmo and then press the face, and this is going to conform that face to this object, right? So it might be a little bit hard to see here, but you can now see, hang on, it didn't quite work. It should be fairly much touching that, and we'll find out if it is by being able to join it directly to that object. And that's true. So I'm going to take a couple of steps back, so when it's not joined, we'll press 3 to go into side mode. We're going to hit radial array, okay? And we're going to go to the center of this face here of this round object, okay? And we can either change the number here, or we can press Shift and move the scroll wheel, okay? Right click to confirm, okay? And what we can do now is we can press 4 and select that object, come around so that we can see everything without it being obstructed by another object. Press Q for Boolean, and we want them to be a union Boolean rather than a difference, so not a subtraction, an addition. And we can right click when we've got our object, and that should be all good to go. And we can bevel this a bit like that. It's going to create lots of crazy geometry. But we just want to give it a nice bevel. The caudal one works quite nicely here. Okay. Yeah, okay. So there you go. We've got this little dial on the side. Okay, and what we could do is we could Shift D, drag it down, go into isolated mode by pressing period, press S for scale, V for pivot, right click to select, go out of isolated mode and we could scale this down and possibly out and down again on a uniform scale and maybe out again. Okay, and we've got another kind of guy there, and I might just bring this one to the front here so it's kind of a little bit off kilter. So you've got this sort of double, if we take our edges off, that actually looks really nice when we've got our reflections and our highlights. Okay, so I think that looks, I might use one of my custom matte caps here made with the plugin that I made for Blender called Matte Caps Forever. You can check that out. There'll be a link in the description. And this one's from my hard surface matte caps back, which you can also buy on Gumroad. Okay, so that looks quite nice. Yeah, I am happy with that. Okay, let's go back to our modeling matte cap. Okay, and turn our edges back on. So finally, let's deal with the satellite dish. Okay, so I want to select all of the solids that we've just created. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can give them names if we want. So we can go main body. This is good practice, especially if you're going to go into texturing. We can select 2 of these and double click on this and we can go knobs, right? And then we could go to this one and we can call this, no, we want, where is it? This one here, extruded. We can call this aerial. All right, with a capital A, don't know why. And face sheet one, that's our button. So we could say, button underscore front or something. Okay. And then we can select all of these and we can go Control G and put that into a group. And we can call that walkie talkie. All right. And now the satellite dish is going to be a little bit complicated. So what I want to do is I want to come up to here and I want to hide that group, right? So we've got a nice plain area to work with, but we know that everything that we made so far is in that group. So let's start by making the satellite dish. So I'm going to start it very similar to how we did the aerial, okay? And then we're going to build it up from there. So let's bring in a center circle to the very center of the world, okay? And we can just press number 3 to go into face mode and just start to bring a shape up here. Okay, actually, yeah, let's bring a shape up. Let's hide our curves. Okay, all of them, and let's get, this is going to be like the base or the holder of the satellite dish. Okay, and let's just add some cuts in here, just tabbing to change the angle. I want this to be kind of a little bit in the way. Let's add another cut here. All right, and another one here. I want to bring that in. Right, this is just adding like sort of a shape to it so that when we see it silhouette, there's something to it, and there'll be also highlights to it as well. Now this black shader here is really good for seeing silhouette, so we can just sort of turn our overlays off and just see a black silhouette shape, which is really handy. Okay, that can be useful. So I'm going to press Shift and S on this face twice to subdivide. Go into X-ray mode, select everything in the center. Okay, and we're going to kind of do a little bit of everything we've learned up until this point here. Okay, so what I'm going to do that, and I'm going to press Z to toggle my points. Let's take a rectangle in the center here, press C to make it a center rectangle. I'm going to bring this out and press tab, but just a wee bit. Okay, and actually I'm not going to do that. Let's bring this out and imprint onto there. Okay, we can hide this curve. hide this curve by pressing H. We can Alt F, or no, we can Shift F to thicken this one. Oh no, we need to Alt F, which is my patch command, right? I am right, okay. Hide our curve, okay. Select our sheet, Shift F to choose thicken, pull that out, tab. Use our Alt Control Shift, bring this down, okay. And then we can radial array this all the way around the center, holding down Shift to make it less common. I don't want this to be over the top, but I do want this to be narrower from the get-go. Okay, and then we use our radial array. I can come out of X-ray mode if I want, and I really want, I don't know, just enough of those that it's got some kind of impact. I want to fillet these out, and we can just really actually just select all of these and give them a chamfer or a fillet. Or that might be a little bit, let's just select these one by one, going around. Might speed this up. Right. One by one. And the fillet works quite nicely. We'll call it a caudal fillet, I think, if it will work. We can make that a little bit bigger. And you may find it a little bit tricky at times, but that should work. Okay, turn our edges off, and you'll see that that's got a nice little bit of detail to it there. Okay, turning our edges back on. Okay, I spent a little bit more time on that than I would have liked. Now, for this top part, what I really want is more of like a sort of a, I don't know, some kind of pyramid-y kind of shape. So I'm just going to take this line and bring it to this edge, and I'm going to bring it to about here, right? And then I'm going to use the I'm going to go up to here. I'm going to press Shift and F, and I'm going to choose this revolve tool. This can be a little bit fiddly, but I'm going to take it to the center of this face. I'm just going to pull it down if I go into front mode, and we've got this kind of face here. So right click to accept. I'm going to press Alt F to patch that. I'm just going to join these two together. All right, and that can, if it will allow me to. Yeah, so that allowed me to. I can give that a fillet or a chamfer, and I want to make this a little bit less. Something like that. So this is like a little bit more sort of shapely than what we've been working with so far. I can also subdivide this potentially, or just press Z to toggle the points. Subdivide this, go into X-ray mode, and we can scale this in or out. I think in will be quite nice. And turn our points off, and we can have a little nice point like that. So this is the base of our satellite dish, and as you can see, compared to what we did just before, this has got a lot more sort of curvature to it and things like that. We can add fillets to all the appropriate areas. All right, giving that a nice G2 fillet. Now you can take this a lot further, but as you can see, this shape here, right, that we've just made, compared to this shape, we've done almost two different workflows. So as you'll see, you know, there's a lot of ways to work in plasticity, and that's why I wanted to do this little component, just to show you that, like, with these simple tools, we can work in a lot of different ways. So What I'm going to do next is I'm going to probably go into side mode, and I'm just going to make a sphere above this. All right. And I'm going to probably bring it out here. Or we could actually do a very similar thing to what we did before with the revolve tool. Actually, that's not a bad idea. Let's temporarily hide this object. Okay. And I'm just kind of spitballing now. We can bring out a line here. We can Alt X and we can mirror it across. We can press J to join those two together. Okay, I don't know if this is going to work. We can Alt X to mirror that across. We didn't really work with mirror that much yet. And we don't even need to mirror that across. What we can do is we can use that revolve tool and just drag that down like that. And let's have a look if this is an okay satellite dish. So let's bring this back in. Let's G to grab this and R to rotate it. And does that seem to you like a good satellite dish? Scale it down. I'm not sure if it does to me. What happens if we subdivide this? And I don't know. I'm not sure. That looks more like an old lampshade from the 90s. So I'm going to delete that. That was just a little experiment to see if the shape would work. For me, it doesn't. So I'm going to actually use a sphere. Okay. I'm going to bring that in like that. G. And just in terms of where I want it, I think I want it like that, but maybe a little bit. Yeah, that's about right. And I'm going to bring a line across here. Okay, compress. I want to toggle the points off first. And I'm going to bring a line across here like that. I'm not really being accurate, but I can be. Can call it a 45-degree angle. Doesn't matter. And I'm going to press C to cut through. I'm going to go into solid edge mode. Select the edge and press. That's already cut. Okay. And then we can delete the right hand side. Okay. So I feel like that's not quite right, but we can, just for the angle, and I can pull that out a little bit like that. Okay. And let's bring a rectangle over here. Press C. I'm just going to go into 1, and I'm actually just going to drag this back. And I'm going to start to bring this up. Right click to select the cube, right? And we've made a cube. I'm going to bring this all the way up like this, okay? And I'm going to hit this, and it's going to conform to the body like so. Okay, but I don't feel like that supports it well enough. So we can then select this edge, this edge, this edge, and hiding our curves. We'll select this edge, this edge, this edge, and this edge, and duplicate it. Okay. And then we can SV, make the pivot up here, scale it, and then we can scale it uniformly, I think. And then we can G and grab it up like that, and we can pull it back out so we can kind of see its placement. And I think we need to press Control 3 to go into left mode. And then I want to change the pivot again back to the center. And I want to SS to scale it uniformly. I'm going to press G. And I'm going to press Shift I and imprint it and see how that works. Okay, I want it to be a little bit fatter than that. So Control 3, S scale, and now we can try and imprint that. So Shift I. And I think that's a nice imprint. And then what we can do is we can actually bring that out like that. We can hide our curve. We can give this some nice rounded bit there. And we can join this to this. Q, Q. Okay. And yeah, I think something like that. Or we might want to make this a little bit fatter first. Bring that in a little bit on the back there. And yeah. And that doesn't like that, so we just go back a step. I think that's quite nice, but I think also we could kind of maybe no, I'm just going to leave that front part like that. That's okay. And we can take this whole thing here, this whole guy. We can take the face here and press Shift and X to delete the face of that. And I kind of didn't think about that when I was doing this, so let's give it a go. Let's go FTHICKN. Try and thicken that. So I'm going to try and fix this problem solving on the fly. So I'm going to try and delete these two fillets. Okay, I'm going to try and bring this up till it hits that. And then I'm going to bring this up till it hits that. And that's not going to let me. So let's bring this bottom part up here till it hits the face. And we've got our curve back. So look, there's always a way that you can deal with these. Now, I don't know what to do about this edge, but I do want it to have like a little bit of a lip. So I'm just going to press extrude, and that should just bring that out. Or we can go extrude out, and that way it's sort of, we can choose face mode on either side and give it that kind of lip there. And then we can give this nice fillets. Probably don't need to do one on the inside. All right, so if we show our edges, we've got that. And then what we can do is we can turn our edges back on, choose this main face, press spacebar to make the face, and then we can just choose that very center of that. To make a circle, you can press Alt-Z to see where your circle is being made. We want a fairly large circle, and we can actually press Shift Space to make that temporary plane where we can manage it, and then we can bring our circle and we can G and bring it out on that temporary plane. And then what we can do is we can choose this circle and we can Shift I and we can imprint it on that, getting rid of our temporary plane. And we can select our curve and delete it and go out of X-ray mode. Okay, I'm going to pull this out, and you're going to notice that it starts pointing out like that. So we want to press E to extrude. So it extrudes out uniformly. We don't want much there. This is quite a dishy satellite dish. I would usually probably make it a bit shallower than this, but for the sake of this tutorial, we'll just keep moving. Okay, so I've made that and I've pulled that out. We'll just pull that out and O, and let's just press extrude and pull this like all the way out like that. We can select this face, press tab, pull this out, okay, and bring that in, and we can just add fillets to everywhere that we feel like it is pertinent, okay, which is, for me on this, pretty much everything except that underside. Okay, and I'm going to call them G2s in this case. And I also want a nice big G2 fillet in the center there. We can maybe even pull that back like that. And that's really nice. Okay, so if we turn our edges off, look at our shader, we've got that real nice satellite dish there. Now, what I might do is, because this is all connected, but it's not connected to that yet, is S and V. And I'll just see if I can just kind of, that's kind of mucking it up. Let's make that the temporary plane. And let's see if we can make SV, this the pivot. See what happens. So let's select this whole thing. Something in between. Yeah, okay, I'm going to just go with that for now. I'm going to go GX, GZ. And what we can do is we can do our final fillets on this part here. Something like that. And then on the round, we can maybe do a chamfer. Right, which is going to be crazy. We can try and for an apex chamfer, which it doesn't like, so we go to offset. Okay. And I'm just going to select this, turn our edges back on, go back to our normal shader, press Q, and Q again, and Boolean those as a regular Boolean. And then we can turn our walkie-talkie back on, and our satellite dish is massive. Okay, so we're going to GG, hold down Control. Actually, we'll just bring this out here somewhere like that. Press SV, add our pivot there. We're going to press GG, hold down Control, and try and lock it to this face. Okay, now we can scale it down. And I think something like that. And we can rotate it in the Z. Okay, and there we have it. We can GG, and or G and G and Shift Z to lock it to that plane. Just put it somewhere that you like. Okay, and then we can turn off our overlays. We can turn off our edges, and we can look at our item. And so that looks really cool, although I do feel we could put more work into it, but for the sake of this tutorial, I feel like I've taught quite a few basic commands and a few complicated controls as well that would get people started modeling in plasticity. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Check out more of my vids for loads of other plasticity related stuff. Not all of them are as long as this one. If you stay to the end, congratulations, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Tschüss!